This is Lock's Lane, a little lane that runs from Newton Village out onto the common on Lock's Common. One time it was access to all the fields along here and access for sheep and cattle to go onto the common for grazing. Now it's completely surrounded by houses built in the 1970s, but it's a real haven for wildlife full of plants and animals. And today I'm going to be talking mainly about the tree species. There's a thing called Hooper's Law which says that for every 100 years that a hedge has been in existence, there will be one species of tree or shrub. So if there's 3 species, the hedge is 300 years old. Of course, this doesn't work in many cases, and probably not here, because the hedge has been mucked around with, been cut down, been replanted. Difficult to know how old the original hedge was anyway, but it's a good way of looking at all the different species in the hedge, so that's what we'll be looking at. These are some of the commoner bushes you'll find in a hedge like this. This is blackthorn, which later on has the blue blackberries, the sloes, and then as we move down the lane we get hawthorn or may, and this is an apple tree, I think probably a cultivated apple that escaped from a garden. And then further down again we've got elder with the creamy white flowers, and then later in the year it'll have the dark red or blue blackberries which can be made into wine. This is holly, a common constituent of hedges. All the berries have gone because they will have been eaten by birds by this time. This is elm. Most of the elms have gone from the British countryside because of Dutch elm disease, which is caused by a beetle which tunnels into the bark. But the trees can survive for a short time. They reach about 10 to 15 feet and then they die off. So we still have young elm trees, but they never grow to full size. In fact, if you look over here, you can see a dead elm there with its branches. That's one that's succumbed to the Dutch elm disease. Characteristic of elms is the leaf shape. Notice that one side of the leaf is longer than the other. Where the leaf blade joins the main midrib, there's a longer side to the left and a shorter side to the right. That's characteristic of all elms. This section of hedge is made of dogwood, and I think it's planted because it's uniform dogwood, characteristic veins on the leaves and the dark stems. And if we go over to the other side of the lane, we can see some hawthorn or may in flower. It's got a strong smell. Some people say like cat's pee, but it's an important food plant for bees and other insects early in the year. And a lot of the hedge is made up of ivy, which strictly isn't a shrub, it's a creeper, but it's an important constituent of the hedge. People get a bit confused with the leaves because these are not typical ivy-shaped leaves, these are the young leaves. This is Escallonia, a non-native shrub that is used widely by the sea because it's very salt tolerant. For example, on the Scilly Isles it's used to produce high hedges around the fields, which are then used to grow flowers and vegetables. This is beech with the delicate, very delicate green of the young leaves. We used to eat them when I was a kid, and we called them bread and cheese, although they tasted nothing like bread and cheese. Here we have 2 common tree species, sycamore with its maple-like leaves and the familiar keys later on in the autumn. And just a bit further on, we've got ash, again with typical shaped leaves with leaflets in pairs. Ash trees are threatened by a disease called ash dieback, which is killing many of the ash trees in the countryside at the moment. It's a fungus disease. Another tree species, Hornbeam. This is almost certainly planted. It grows wild in the east of England, but this side of the country it's mostly used as a hedging plant. Quite how this got here I don't know, but this is horse chestnut sapling, probably just self-seeded here. There are thousands of species of insects which will live in this sort of habitat. Here is just one. These are the caterpillars of the ermine moth, and they start off in these cocoons. Later they come out of the cocoon, as they have here, and then they'll be feeding on the leaves of the tree, which in this case is blackthorn. Here we are in Lochs Lane, which runs from Nottage village to the sea, not Newton village, as I said the other day. I thought today we'd have a look at some of the wildflowers that grow in the hedgerows along here. Here we are at the seaward end of Lochs Lane, and there's a couple of introduced plants. This is red valerian. It's not the same as the valerian used in medicines. It's a related plant, but it was introduced in the 18th century into gardens, and now it's spread all over Britain, particularly near the sea. And going this way we have this white flower, which you can see these days on motorways and so on. It was not introduced into Britain until about the 1850s, when soldiers returning from the Crimean War emptied their straw mattresses. The straw, which came from the Crimea, contained seeds of this plant, and it first appeared around Dover in the 1850s, and it's spread gradually all over the country since then. This is Queen Anne's lace, as they call it in America. We call it cow parsley. It's a common member of the umbelliferae family, which includes many species, including carrots, parsnips, and some poisonous ones like hemlock. Here's a common hedgerow plant, herb Robert. The herb means obviously that it was used for herbal remedies, and it's thought that Robert is from an Old English word meaning red, so it's simply the red herb. This is another member of the dandelion family. This is Southhistle. It was fed to feeding sows because when you break the stems it produces a milky latex, which made people think that it would be good for nursing pigs. The leaves can be eaten. Notice the pattern in these leaves of the Southhistle. They're actually made by a tiny insect that the adult lays an egg inside the leaf, and the grub moves around in the middle of the leaf, making these patterns and eating the inside of the leaf, and eventually hatches out. It's called a Leafminer. And here we've got a non-native plant called three-cornered leek, and you'll notice it all over the hedge banks around Porthcawl. About 10 years ago it was quite rare. It's an introduced plant. It originally started appearing in the West Country, and then it came over to Pembrokeshire, and now it's everywhere. Quite an attractive plant, but like so many invasive species, it tends to take over. It dominates over other plants. This is wild radish, one of a large group of plants called crucifers or cruciferae. The flowers have 4 petals in the shape of a cross, hence the name crucifer. These are the seed pods of the wild radish. You can see they're swollen and inflated. Wild radish is a native plant, but this one, short pod mustard, is an introduced plant. It's become common in recent years. Looks superficially similar, but it's taller and the flowers are in dense heads, and later it has these short cylindrical pods. That's why it's called short pod mustard. It's now everywhere, all over Porthcawl. This is hedge garlic or garlic mustard, another member of the crucifer family. Very common hedgerow plant, also called jack by the hedge. The leaves have got a delicate garlicky flavour and can be used in salads. This is another herb plant. It's called herb Bennett, which comes from Herba benedicta, blessed herb, because the medieval monks used to use it a lot in herbal remedies. Notice over here the hooked seeds which hook onto clothing and get spread in that way. This is black bryony, another climber in the hedge. Glossy dark green leaves. Later in the year it has blackberries. Nettles are more and more abundant in hedgerows these days. It's believed to be because of air pollution, nitrates in the air which come from farming and from central heating cisterns and some car exhausts. The nitrates in the air fall down as rain and they enrich the soil so that nitrogen-loving plants like nettles thrive, but it tends to crowd out a lot of other plants. So we are actually losing a lot of hedgerow plants because of air pollution. This is another dandelion look-alike. This one is called beaked hawksbeard. There are dozens of related species to dandelions, but this one is quite distinct. It has multiple flower heads and only small leaves at the base. You can see it very commonly earlier in the year all over the roadsides around Porthcawl. This is an actual dandelion. It's a single flower on a single hollow stem. Every single part of the plant can be used. The flowers can be used to make wine. The leaves can be used in salads. The roots can be roasted to make a kind of coffee. The seed heads can be used to tell the time, the dandelion clocks. You can even make a musical instrument out of the stems. Here's one I prepared earlier. You split the end of the stem and put it in your mouth and blow.